We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. And we're bringing you the news that is affecting the dynamic ASEAN region. On today's headlines. Philippine National Police is eyeing the Philippine Arena as one of the ideal areas where large LED television will be set up to allow more supporters to witness the inauguration of President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr. on June 30. And crowds gathered in Davao City to celebrate the inauguration of Sara Duterte as Vice President of the Philippines. And Thailand announced it would drop rules requiring people to wear masks outdoors and no longer require foreign visitors to register before travel, as cases of COVID fall and the kingdom seeks to lure tourists back. And what happens when Donald Trump, a Bangkok moto taxi driver, and a Squid Games contestant take the stage in a Bangkok bar late on a Saturday night? It can only mean one thing, an air guitar battle for peace.
Because not only is this an art...
And first in our news, the Philippine National Police is eyeing the Philippine Arena as one of the ideal areas where large LED television will be set up to allow more supporters to witness the inauguration of President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr. or Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. on June 30. If the Philippine Arena were used as a remote viewing area, it could accommodate around 70,000 inside and another 100,000 outside, particularly in the front area of the arena, according to Major General Valeriano de Leon, PNP Director for Operations, in a statement on Sunday. De Leon said they are now coordinating with the camp of Marcos on their proposal to use the Philippine Arena in Bulacan as one of the viewing areas, along with other strategic places that can accommodate a large number of people. Aside from the Philippine Arena, De Leon said another area where they could set up a viewing area for live streaming of the inauguration would be the Philippine Sports Center in Pasig City, which could accommodate up to 40,000 people. He also said they will also push for the use of the North Luzon Express Terminal, also in Bulacan, and the Mall of Asia in Pasay City. The National Capital Region Police Office, or NCRPO, said all systems are in place to secure the inauguration of Marcos. Meanwhile, Vice President-elect Sara DuterteCarpio shared one of the most important lessons she learned in life on Sunday, the day of her inauguration, as the 15th Vice President of the country in Davao City. She had wanted to become a doctor, she said, a pediatrician in her younger years, and she was even consumed with this ambition. But she said God led her to a different path. Let's take a look.
My life is a testament to the power of a God. My younger self was consumed by a dream to become a doctor. I pursued a pathway that I thought could help me realize that dream. But I was directed toward another way. And now I am a lawyer. When I committed myself to governance and public service, I was also determined to finish 3 consecutive terms as mayor. That will not happen anymore. I am now the Vice President-elect. The voice of 32.2 million Filipinos was loud and clear. With the message to serve our motherland. And this message has been reiterated in my oath to consecrate myself to the service of the nation. There is a God whose will transcends the desires of our hearts, one whose will directs us to the way that we might not have imagined.
The Vice President-elect also honored the country's national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, in her speech. She said she hoped Rizal's life and memory would light up the fire of patriotism among Filipinos. She also said that Rizal taught Filipinos that selflessness and sacrifice could change our country's fate. Let's listen in.
Today, we celebrate the life and works of our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. May his memory light up the fire within us to become patriots. Rizal taught us that selflessness and sacrifice could change our country's fate and shape our children's future. The bravery of Rizal completes the fabric of our identity as Filipinos.
She also noted the value of the family and the importance of parents who make sure that their children grow up in a loving environment. She talked of the complex future facing the young in today's world, which is rife with conflict and uncertainty. Let's listen in.
Let us show our love for our country by taking care of our families and communities, despite the unending challenges that come their way. Today is Father's Day. Today, our children are facing a very complex future, one that is rife with conflicts and uncertainties. Some of these challenges include the winding cycle of poverty, the trauma of broken families, the lifelong baggage because of irresponsible and bad parenting, the abandonment issues due to an absentee parent. A strong, loving, happy family sets down all the basic foundations essential in the development and growth of a child. At home, parents have the duty to teach children the values of integrity, discipline, respect, and compassion for others. And we should never forget that it is the duty of each Filipino family to emphasize that education begins at home.
Now, some of these challenges, as we heard, include the winding cycle of poverty, trauma of broken families, the lifelong baggage because of irresponsible and bad parenting, the abandonment issues due to an absentee parent, the anguish of gender confusion, discrimination, the destruction brought about by drugs, the lure of easy money and criminality, cases of HIV and other STDs, the failure to identify and speak up against different kinds of abuses, the life-altering effects, teenage pregnancy, the detrimental effects of illiteracy, the emotional injury of bullying, unstable mental wellness, recruitment to support terrorism, misinformation in the internet. The Vice President-elect, who will officially assume office, who will officially assume office on June 30, said that we cannot afford to squander the future of our children and many others. She said the days ahead may be full of challenges that call for us to be more united as a nation. Meanwhile, President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is encouraging the public to continue wearing face masks and observing other health protocols amid the prevailing pandemic. Marcos made the appeal after the Department of Health warned of the possible rise in severe and critical COVID cases by August because of the waning immunity from the coronavirus vaccine and the reduction in adherence to minimum public health standards. To recall, the Cebu provincial government earlier issued an ordinance on the optional use of face masks, but Malacanang clarified that the local directive was not supported by President Duterte. The palace said the policy on mandatory wearing of face masks, crafted by the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases and approved by Duterte, prevails over the local ordinance. Meanwhile, Thailand announced it would drop rules requiring people to wear masks outdoors and no longer require foreign visitors to register before travel as cases fall and the kingdom seeks to lure tourists back in the kingdom. Face masks have been compulsory in public in Thailand, including outdoors since mid-2021 when the Delta variant was running rampant. But as the pandemic has subsided, the tourism-dependent kingdom has gradually relaxed COVID restrictions in a bid to boost visitor numbers. Thailand's relaxation on face masks comes after similar moves by regional peers, including Cambodia and Singapore. Tawisin Visa Noyotin, spokesman for the Thai COVID Task Force, said that wearing masks outside would become voluntary, but was still recommended in crowded areas, entertainment venues, and on public transport. He also said the Health Ministry would announce further details of the mask relaxation, including when it would come into force. On July 1st, the government will also end the Thailand Pass system, under which foreign tourists had to register and show proof of vaccination and health insurance before they could fly to the kingdom. Visitors will have to carry vaccine certificates or take COVID tests on arrival. The move is seen as an attempt to bolster the sputtering economy, which has seen growth hammered by the pandemic and living costs rising. In today's other news, 2 Islamic militants accused of kidnapping and killing 4 foreigners in the restive southern Philippines were detained after surrendering to the military. The fugitives were members of the feared kidnap for ransom group, the Abu Sayyaf, and they've been handed over to police on Jolo Island in Sulu. Let's take a look.
About the recent surrender of 2 notorious Abu Sayyaf group members in the persons of Almudir Yada and Bentato Quirino. They were involved in the execution of kidnapped victims, such as the German kidnapped victim, Mr. Werden Kantner, on February 2017. He was been abducted with a $30 million ransom. They were also involved in the beheading of Canadian national. They were further involved in the kidnapping of 21 Malaysians, Westerners, and U.S. citizens in 2001.
This is an indication na gumaganda na yung ating security landscape dito sa probinsya ng Sulu. So, the challenge now is how to sustain itong gains namin.
The 2 suspects, Almujer Yada and Ben Quirino, have been accused of the November 2016 kidnapping and subsequent murders of German sailor Jürgen Kantner and his female partner and compatriot. The body of the woman was found with a gunshot wound aboard the yacht that went adrift in the Sulu Sea after the kidnappers boarded it. Kantner was taken to Jolo and beheaded by his captors in early 2017 after they reportedly tried to negotiate a ransom. The militants also allegedly carried out the murders of Canadians John Ridsdale and Robert Hall, who were abducted in September 2015 alongside Hall's Filipino girlfriend and a Norwegian man from a tourist resort. The Abu Sayyaf beheaded Ridsdale and Hall in 2016, but later released the woman and the Norwegian, who were both unharmed. De Los Santos said there have been no kidnappings in the region for the past 2 years. Only about 20 Abu Sayyaf militants were still operating in the area, according to authorities. In other news, the United States said it was deeply concerned by the 2-year prison sentence given to a high-profile environmental activist in Vietnam this week. U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a statement, quote, "The United States calls on the government of Vietnam to release Nguyen Thi Can, who has been recognized internationally for her work to advance climate change and sustainable energy issues in Vietnam, as well as other detained environmental activists working for the benefit of Vietnam and its people," unquote. Can, 46, was arrested in February on a tax evasion accusation, according to state-owned media. On Friday, her NGO, Greenid, said she had been jailed for 2 years. She had been among the few in the communist nation challenging the government's plans to increase coal power to fuel economic development. The first Vietnamese winner of the Goldman Environmental Prize, Can and Greenid, had convinced officials to strip 20,000 megawatts of coal power from the National Energy Plan by 2030. But while the activist has received international acclaim, she has been the target of smear campaigns in her country. Can's imprisonment comes as raids targeting corrupt officials and those implicated in economic scandals have intensified. The communist regime doesn't tolerate dissent, and several dozen activists are in prison for speaking out against the authorities. And Muslims took to the streets in huge protests across Asia after their Friday prayers sparked by remarks about their Prophet Muhammad by an Indian ruling party official that embroiled the country in a diplomatic storm. Anger has engulfed the Islamic world since last week when a spokeswoman for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling party commented on the relationship between the Prophet, their Prophet, and his youngest wife on a TV debate show. Anger has engulfed the Islamic world because of this when a woman for the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling party commented on the relationship between their Prophet and his youngest wife. Around 20 countries have since called in their Indian ambassadors, and the party has gone into damage control, suspending the official from its ranks and insisting it respected all religions. Friday saw the biggest street rallies yet in response to the furor, with police estimating more than 100,000 people mobilized across Bangladesh. The row follows anger across the Muslim world in 2020 after French President Emmanuel Macron defended the right of a satirical magazine to publish caricatures of their prophet. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Alam namin.
Kung kayo ay may kilalang grupo o individual na may natatanging paraan na pagresponde, iparating sa amin sa pamagitan po ng text sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayong magpadala ng mensahe sa ating Facebook page at Net25TV. Hintayin po namin ang inyong pong mensahe. Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels.
Masiglahin ang araw ng linggo. Kayo'y maaantig.
Huwag mo ubusin ang luha mo sa wala dito.
Mapapaisip.
What are we gonna do?
Matatawa.
Why so much food? Even no money, no honey, we make utang-utang.
Mapapahanga. At mapapainda. Kasama si Daking, ang nag-iisang comedy king Dolphy.
Ano pangalan mo? Big po. Big po. Ano mo si Fernando po?
Tito Vic and Joey.
Mahirap ikwento, Vicky. Mahabang istorya.
At marami pang artista na kinagigiliwan noon, magpahanggang ngayon.
My endless love.
Cine Throwback, tuwing linggo, alas 12 ng tanghali sa Net25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together, let's stand together sa Net25.
Welcome back. The news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We now go to Bangladesh, where monsoon storms in Bangladesh and India have killed at least 59 people now and unleashed devastating floods that have left millions of people stranded. Floods are a regular menace to millions of people in low-lying Bangladesh. But experts say climate change is increasing their frequency, their ferocity, and unpredictability. Relentless downpours over the past week have inundated vast stretches of Bangladesh's northeast, with troops deployed to evacuate households cut off from neighboring communities. Flooding in Bangladesh worsened on Saturday morning after a temporary reprieve from the rains the previous afternoon. At least 16 people, meanwhile, have been killed since Thursday in India's remote Meghalaya, according to the state's chief minister Conrad Sangma on Twitter, after landslides and surging rivers that submerged roads. 18 people, meanwhile, had died in floodwaters or landslides around the state since Thursday, according to the agency, with nearly 7,500 people rescued on Saturday by mid-afternoon. Forecasters say the floods were set to worsen over the next 2 days, with heavy rains in Bangladesh and upstream in India's northeast. Before this week's rain, the Sylhet region was still recovering from its worst floods in nearly 2 decades late last month, when at least 10 people were killed, 4 million others affected. More countries must urgently adopt and improve early warning systems to reduce the risks from an increasing number of climate hazards and other disasters across the world, according to a forum that has just concluded a few weeks ago. And this reaffirms the importance of one of WMO's top priorities, to ensure universal access to early warning services in the next 5 years. The Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, or GPDRR, called on countries to think resilience and to improve preventive measures and to stop the spiral of increasing disaster impact and risk. This was held in Bali, Indonesia. Let's take a look.
We need to do more, especially for the most vulnerable, to incorporate disaster risk in how we live, build, and invest. A people-centered early warning system combined with early action will save lives and empower individuals and communities to act in timely and appropriate manners. This approach reduces the likelihood of loss of lives, personal injury and illness, and damage to property, assets, and the environment.
In Tanjung Benoa Village, Bali Province, the Deputy Secretary General witnessed a tsunami drill exercise in a local school with Major General Ni Suharyanto, head of Indonesia Disaster Management Authority or BNBP. The site is one of 3 schools where students are trained for earthquake, tsunami evacuation from the school to a higher floor in a safer building under a UNDP-supported project funded by the government of Japan. In this low-lying area, hotels with 3 or more floors have signed a memorandum of understanding and have been designated as a vertical evacuation centers. On Wednesday, Amina Mohammed also addressed the opening session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, an international forum that brings together governments, the UN systems, and key players to share their knowledge and discuss the latest developments and trends in reducing disaster risks. The 2022 Global Platform will provide a unique and timely opportunity to showcase the importance of international solidarity and cooperation, as well as to discuss ways to tackle underlying risk drivers both locally and globally. In other news, the incoming administration of President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. will exhaust all efforts to ensure food security in the country. That, according to his press secretary-designate, Trixie Cruz Angeles. This after the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Food Program warned of a global food crisis affecting poor and developing countries. In a statement, Angeles Cruz assured the public that the Marcos administration is ready to stabilize the food supply and improve food production. On Thursday, the Department of Agriculture said the country is now feeling the impact of the food crisis as prices of goods continue to soar. Marcos earlier vowed to come up with a plan to attain food security and stabilize the prices of agricultural commodities. Nearly 1 billion people all over the world have a mental disorder. That's according to the latest data from 2019, and that staggering figure is even more worrying if you consider that it includes around 1 in 7 teenagers. To make matters worse, in the first year of the pandemic, rates of common conditions such as depression and anxiety went up by more than 25%, according to the UN Health Agency. Let's listen in.
The key findings of the report are that we need to that countries need to transform their actions for mental health. They need to deepen their value and commitment for mental health. They need to change the environments for mental health, and they need to improve mental health care. And this is based on this wide review, which found that mental disorders are extremely common. Almost 1 billion people in the world have a mental disorder. Most people do not have access to care. Less than a third of people with psychosis and less than a third people with depression have access to mental health care, and much of the care that is available is not adequate. Mental health is also associated with human rights violations of all kinds, including neglect in hospitals, including discrimination in the community, including lack of access to mental health care, as I mentioned. The report also really outlines important reasons for investing in mental health.
The timing of the report is related to some data that we collected last year, measuring how countries are progressing in their mental health systems in general. And despite the increased demand and interest generated by the pandemic, the report showed us that progress was not that good as expected. So we thought that it was a time after nearly 20 years to put together the evidence that we have, the dimension of the problem, the alternatives that many countries are finding in order to progress and to do better.
Now, even before the coronavirus hit, only a small fraction of people in need of help had access to effective, affordable, and quality mental health care, according to the World Health Organization. For example, more than 70% of those suffering from psychosis worldwide do not get the help they need. Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization concluded a landmark bundle of deals covering fishing subsidies, food insecurity, and even COVID-19 vaccines following a hectic round-the-clock talks. Let's listen in.
Really, but today we've shown that the WTO can produce outcomes and multilateral outcomes at that. Thank you. It was not an easy process, an easy road. There were a lot of bumps, just like I predicted. It was like a roller coaster, but in the end, we got there.
The second major issue on the table was the plan for a COVID-19 vaccine patents waiver aimed at providing more equitable access to the jabs. After months of wrangling and talks going down to the wire this week to win over some major players in pharmaceutical manufacturing to a compromise text, the U.S. and China finally clinched the deal by agreeing on which countries would benefit from the waiver. China provided a binding commitment not to take advantage of the waiver. WTO members also agreed to help ease supply shortages that some countries faced during the pandemic. With Russia's war in Ukraine fueling a global food security crisis, ministers agreed on the importance of not imposing export restrictions. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Maglaro tayo dito sa bahay. Mabuti pa pumunta ka sa garahe at kapag dumating ang lola mo, bilis, tumakbo ka at ipaalam sa amin, okay? Yolay, sige na.
Si Esperanza, akala nakikipaglaro ang nakapaligid sa kanya.
Esperanza, anong ginagawa mo? Para kanino yung 3 cupcakes?
Ha? Kapag nahanap ng lola mo ang papa mo sa bahay, aba, talo siya.
Ayaw mo naman matalo ako sa laro at umalis dito.
Ayoko, gusto ko dito lang kayo.
Si Elsa, hindi inaakala. Pinaglalaroan lamang siya.
Gusto ko lang malaman kung kailan ko ba makukuha agad si Esperanza.
Uy, nako, posibleng ilang taon.
Mi Esperanza.
Talo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Ang lahat ng kumakalat na chismis tungkol sa korupsyon sa administrasyon ng not so honorable na si Mayor Luz Valde, I'm confirming it. Totoo ang lahat ng iyon.
I promise po that I will get to the bottom of these issues.
Si Ma'am Selena, siya may kagagawa ng lahat ng to.
Good job, Richie. Dahil sa'yo, mabilis kong natupad ang mga plano.
Susumbong kita kay Mayor Luz sa kay Erwin.
Magagawa mo pa kaya yun kung tegi ka na.
Mayor Luz Corrupt! Mayor Luz Corrupt! Mayor Luz Corrupt! Mayor Luz Corrupt!
Actually, it's my fault.
No. Ako ang may kasalanan.
Panalo o talo, it's you. Weeknights pagkatapos ng Mi Esperanza. Dito lang sa Net 25, Prime Time ng Pamilya.
Mahal kita.
Mahal din kita.
Ngayong linggo, love is in the air. Sa Net 1N.
Teka, ako na dyan. Parang nangangamoy pag-ibig. Naamoy ko nga yung pag-ibig. Kahit sino gugustuhin ako mapangasawa.
Ano bang pinagsasasabi mo?
Ngayon, nandito tayo para makisaya sa kasal ng iba pero sana tayo na ang susunod na ikakasal.
Yun mo. Halika na.
Oh, teka lang, nagpo-propose ako.
Everybody can feel it. At walang age limit.
Gusto ko magpakasal na tayong dalawa.
Ano ka ba?
As I told you before, We don't have much time.
Ay, never twice.
Panalo tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Welcome back. And oil prices, no stopping in the spike in oil prices. They will implement another big-time price increase on petroleum products this week. Yusek Gerardo Ergiza Jr. from the Department of Energy explains.
Last week nakita natin ang bahagyang pagbaba fluctuation sa world market price sa Dubai benchmark. At bahagyang lumiit ito and we're expecting na lilit nga. Kaya lang ang bayaran ho ay nasa dolyar at biglang tumaas ang presyo ng dolyar last week. Kaya yung multiplier ho natin sa dolyar hindi ho constant tumaas. Kaya i-multiply mo yung per barrel, tumaas yung net effect niya. Ayun ho ang isang rason kung bakit talagang bagyang tumas ulit dahil tumas yung dolyar. Pangalawa, yung sa technology ho, ang demand sa diesel, lalong-lalo nakita nyo tumaas. Actually, yung gasolina bumaba. Dahil mas mataas ang demand kasi it doesn't mean na kung yung crudo mo bumababa o dumadami, ang refinery process, so yung desulfurization process sa diesel is self-limiting. So halos constant lang, hindi nag-i-increase so yung production sa diesel. Kaya hindi niya talaga makikater yung actual demand kasi because of this process dun sa technology, talagang naiipit ang diesel. But makikita ng kababayan natin, ang gasolina talagang bumaba rin. Ang tumaas talaga dun sa diesel po. Makikita na nga natin na umiepekto hindi lang yung variable lang ng demand in production. Umiepekto na rin yung variable ng dollar. Kahit sinasabi mo na bumaba yung per barrel pero mas mahal yung dolyar kaya multiplier mo lumalaki rin. Pangalawa, kahit sabihin natin na dumadaming supply ng crudo pero yung manufacturing volume mo na ginagawa sa diesel halos pareho rin. Dahil yung constant rin halos yung refinery process mo ng pagtanggal ng sulfur. Ito yung tawag na desulfurization process. Ang tawag na dito sa industry ngayon ito, yung structural problems po natin dun sa technical matters dun sa production.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered a speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And there he laid the blame on the West's inflation of the current U.S. administration and the European bureaucracy. He said Russia's offensive in Ukraine had no influence on the global economic difficulties. The president said years of quantitative easing have expanded the money supply in the U.S. and Eurozone by 38% and 20% respectively, and he accused Western nations of using those vast amounts of newly printed cash to buy up global goods. Here's more.
I would also like to add the following. For a long period of time, the U.S. was a big supplier in the food market, and quite justifiably, they were proud of that. They were proud of their agriculture, farming traditions. It was a good example for many, us included. But right now, the role of America is drastically changed. It used to be a net exporter of food, and right now it's a net importer. In other words, they print money and they divert goods flows to their benefit, buying food from across the world. Even higher rates of import growth can be seen in the EU. Yes, this increase in demand, which is not secured by the supply of goods, has set off a wave of global inflation. That's where it comes from. Over the last 2 years, everything in the world has become pricier. Regarding Europe, the rising prices are further exacerbated by their fiascos in the energy policy they pursue. they were blindly counting on renewables and spot supplies of natural gas, which resulted in a drastic increase in the price of energy. We've been seeing that starting from the third quarter last year. And I reiterate, it happened long before the beginning of our military operation in Donbass. We have nothing to do with that. They did it themselves. The prices were soaring, and they're trying to pin it on someone else. To February this year, the global fertilizer prices have grown by more than 70%. Unfortunately, we see no signs that these price trends are going to be reversed anytime soon. Quite the contrary. This situation is exacerbated by the blockage of the work of our enterprises and fertilizer producers in Belarus and in Russia. And it's easy to calculate how it's going to play out, because shortages of fertilizers will result in lower crops. There's going to be a bigger risk of undersupply of food for the world market. Prices will climb further up, and this carries the risk of famine in the poorest countries. And of course, the blame is on the US and the Euro bureaucracy. And this problem did not emerge today. And regardless of what certain demagogues are saying, Russia's certainly not to blame, even though they are trying to pin the blame on us. This situation has been forming over many years, spurred on by short-sighted actions of those who like to address their own issues at someone else's expenses, by those who still rely on financial emission to redivert goods flows to their advantage, thereby exacerbating the deficits and humanitarian catastrophes in certain regions of the world. Basically, this is this very same colonial policy. This is the new edition. It's far more sophisticated. You won't be able to understand what's happening at first sight.
And today's other news, TikTok said Oracle will store all the data from its U.S. users in a bid to allay fears about its safety in the hands of a platform owned by ByteDance in China. Take a look. TikTok will continue to use its own data centers in Virginia and Singapore to back up information as it works to fully pivot to relying on Oracle in the United States, it said in a post. We know we are among the most scrutinized platforms from a security standpoint, and we aim to remove any doubt about the security of U.S. user data, according to Albert Kalamag, who handles U.S. security public policy at TikTok. The announcement came as the popular video snippet sharing service fended off concerns about the ability of engineers in China to access information about U.S. users that isn't public. ByteDance employees have repeatedly accessed information about U.S. TikTok users, according to a BuzzFeed news report citing leaked audio from TikTok in-house meetings. TikTok has been adamant that it has never given U.S. user data to Chinese officials and that it would refuse if asked to do so. Last month, a TikTok spokesperson told AFP TikTok created a new U.S. data security devoted to strengthening protection policies and protocols to safeguard user information. And finally, in our news, what happens when Donald Trump, a Bangkok moto taxi driver, and a Squid Games contestant take the stage in a Bangkok bar late on a Saturday night? It can only mean one thing: an air guitar battle for peace. Take a look.
Right, because not only is this an art form, it's a sport, which is why we also have the judging criteria that they have to do. They score from 4.0 to 6.0, which is the exact same scoring rubric as Olympic figure skating. Because let's be honest, air guitar, Olympic figure skating, very similar sports. Confidence, right? There's the simple moves like the windmill, Pete Townsend, right? You can go both directions, right, with the windmill. You got from Angus Young of AC/DC, the duck walk, right? And then you got the chicken that moves like Jagger, right? So that's going to depend on the performance, the song selection, the person, their style. Some people have their own extreme moves, power slides to the knees, big kicks, jumps, right? Anything to really wow factor.
Because he's the most craziest character, you know, and to do this, you've got to do something crazy. So let's do the craziest man on the planet, let's do Trump. The competition's fantastic. It's a great idea, completely stupid, but also totally awesome. So everyone should do it. Next year, we should have at least 100 people competing because it's the most fun thing you could do. And I think for most of us, it's probably the only chance you have of becoming a national champion or even a world champion. So you've got to do it.
Like people, a lot of people make fun of this, but you know, not take yourself too seriously, and yeah, it's liberating. And especially the cost, like make air not war. You cannot, you know, hold a gun when you're holding an air guitar. So that's it. And it was fun.
Now, the cosplaying individuals were gathered at the second annual Thai Air Guitar Championship for the chance to represent Thailand in the beloved World Championships in Finland later this year. The hallowed international event, founded in Finland in 1996 to promote world peace, Hold Air Guitars, Not Guns, is the tongue-in-cheek motto, has given rise to good-natured and over-the-top competitions around the world. For the first round, each of the 9 contestants gave a 60-second performance marked by 3 judges, with the top 5 progressing to the second and final round. Contestants were marked on technical ability, stage presence, and airness. The je ne sais quoi of air guitar, when it transcends a performance and becomes a true piece of art, according to Jacob, the organizer, Jacob Airlectic Il Konga. And that is the latest news in the ASEAN region. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place here on ASEAN in Focus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alma Angeles. Have a good day.